The first rule is that a definition should be coextensive with the thing defined. In other words, neither too broad nor too narrow. If you define something, you don't want to include things that are not part of the thing you're defining. So if I'm going to define a table, and I'm going to tell you what a table is, I don't want my definition to also include children. Or I don't want my definition of tables to include strawberries. Also, I don't want my definition to not include the table that is in my dining room. Okay? So if I make a definition, I want it to include all tables. So that thing you're defining, your definition should cover all of it. Every table that you see. That's why the best definition, what we'll go over, is the essential definition. The essential definition does that. Okay, rule number 2. A definition should be clear, not obscure. You'll know those when you see them. Rule number 3. A definition should be literal, not metaphorical. Okay, you don't want to do like some sort of poetry reading when you're given a definition. Definitions are serious. Not that poetry can't be serious, but when you're doing definitions, you're trying to tell somebody a point, right? You don't want to use like the poetic language or something like this, giving comparisons. And you don't want to, if you're going to define a table, you don't want to say like, a table is like a flying carpet and with many colors, right? You wouldn't define a table like that, okay, when you're doing arguments, right? It's metaphorical. Rule number 4, a definition should be brief, not long. Definition should be brief. So if I was going to, you asked me to define something, like define a computer, and I start saying, well, it's a metal and plastic mingled together with the purpose of doing many strange and fantastic things. Getting on the internet, you can use it to look at movies, you can play video games, you can... Look how long my definition. Have I told you essentially what a computer is? No. I'm just rambling on because I really can't give you an essential definition right now. And so I'm just telling you all the things that computers do and things you could do on a computer. Okay? So me personally, I can't give you the essential definition right now of a computer, so I would say something like that to you. So what does that show? That shows I don't know the essential definition of a computer. We don't know the best definitions of a lot of things, okay? And it's not necessary to know the best definition of a lot of things, okay? So, but if you are claiming real knowledge in something, like full knowledge in something, you should be able to give the essential definition of something. And the essential definition, it's brief, okay? It's not long. Because, the longer you go on when you're trying to define something, it shows that you really don't know what you're talking about. Just like if I were going to define a computer for you. It doesn't mean I don't have knowledge of a computer. It just means I don't have the knowledge that would be classified as the highest, the essential knowledge. Okay, so rule number 5, a definition should be positive, not negative. Okay, so if you asked me to define a computer and I say, well, it's not a couch, right? It's not a tree. Okay, what's a computer? Well, it's not a beer. It's not a marker. Okay, does it sound like I know what I'm talking about? Does it sound like I know what a computer is if I say that to you? No, right? So we want definitions not to be some things you can only define negatively. Okay, but not a computer. There's an essential definition for a computer out there somewhere. And if I cared enough, I would go look for it, but I don't really. Listen, let me just tell you, the main one we're going to be using in this class is the first rule. Okay? And how we can summarize that first rule is definitions should be neither too broad nor too narrow. That's the main way to test definitions. That's the most useful way right there. Are they too broad or too narrow? Now, as we go through this course, that's the way I'll be testing definitions. So there's many different types of definitions you can give. A nominal definition is when you try to define something, but you're really just defining the word. One of the most popular nominal definitions is the definition by example. This is a nominal definition. So if you ask me, what's a marker? And I say, it's right here. Here's a marker. Or you ask, what's a banana? And somebody pulls a banana out. Here's a banana right here. Or what's a hand? Right here is a hand. What's a ring? Right here. Here's a ring. Okay, you get the point? These are examples. There's nothing wrong with examples. We use examples all the time. You couldn't function without using examples. You would never get to know anything. But an example is not the highest type of definition you can give. Okay? It's not the highest type of definition one can give of something. What is the highest type of definition one can give of something? The essential definition. Let me just tell you right now that in this class, the two main definitions that we're going to be hitting all the time is the essential definition and definition by example, because those seem to be, well, I don't want to say the most common, because the essential definition is not the most common definition you run into, but it's just going to be the one, it is going to be our standard to measure all other definitions, because the essential definition is the best definition. So, but the one that we will run into a lot is the definition by example, because that's the easiest one to give. And it's the most useful and helpful for normal people, right? When, especially like if you don't know something, somebody just shows it to you, right? And then you know the word for that thing, which is why it's a nominal definition. Essential definitions are principles, okay? When you have an essential definition, you have a solid knowledge of something by which you can use it as a premise to make an argument. Okay? An essential definition is a solid piece of information. The essential definition has two parts. The genus is the general category to which something belongs. That is what a genus is. Okay? The specific difference, I'm not going to write that, so you may want to write that down. The genus is the general category to which something belongs. The specific difference is a characteristic that separates that thing you're defining from the rest of the things in the genus. So I'm just going to give you an example of an essential definition given by Aristotle. Aristotle defined human beings as rational animals. Essential definitions are ultimately a proposition. So I'm going to write that as a proposition. A human is a rational animal. Now just keep in mind, we're not going to get into it, but when Aristotle says rational and animal, those are things that you need to understand what he's talking about. And so in other words, that takes further explanation and argument on my part and from Aristotle to let you know what he means by this. But it's not necessary for this because I'm just showing you what an essential definition is. So what are we defining here? We're defining human. Notice this is a proposition. It's a declarative sentence. What we're defining is human. This word right here. What is a human? It's a rational animal. So I told you this is an essential definition. So what is it saying? What is an essential definition telling us? It is telling us the essence of a human. There's other ways I could define a human. Let me just give this example. What if I said that? What if I defined a human that way? A human is a thing with red hair. You may say to yourself, whoa, not everybody has red hair. And you would be right in saying that because not everybody does have red hair. This is not a good definition of a human being. Some people got black hair, brown hair. Some people don't have any hair. So This definition is not an essential definition. Why? Because it does not apply to all human beings. And using the rules that we went over already, what would that make it? It would be too narrow. Because red hair is an accidental characteristic. In other words, it's not essential. In other words, you could be a human being without having red hair. Okay? People do these type of definitions all the time. All of these are not essential definitions. Why? Because you're leaving people out. You're leaving human beings out, and you don't want to do that, especially when you're defining human beings. We can define a human being by their size, by their eye color, skin color, all of this stuff, but these are not essential definitions. Remember, the essential definition has two parts. It has a genus and it has a specific difference. What would be the genus here? What would be the general category to which human beings belong? It would be animal. A human being is an animal. Now, Aristotle has a specific definition for what an animal is, okay? But in general, you know what an animal is. Are there other animals besides human beings? Of course there are. There's cats, there's lions, tigers, and bears. So are we just one of those? So when you're walking down the street and you see a snake, you mistake it for a human being? Of course not. You know it's a snake. Human beings are different than snakes. So we just can't use animal to define human being. Like if I said a human is an animal. Now that is true. A human is an animal. There's nothing wrong with saying that. But there is something wrong with saying it if you think you're given the essential definition of a human being. Why? Because there's some animals that are not human beings. This is not an essential definition. Because there's lions also that are animals. Squirrels are also animals. We're not being specific enough because we need the specific difference. That's what the specific difference does. It separates humans from the rest of the things in the genus. What are the rest of the things in the genus? Lions, tigers, bears, squirrels, snakes, right? So this rational, this is the characteristic that is doing the separating. This right here is the specific difference. So how are human beings separated and made different? How are they different from the rest of the animals? Rationality. According to Aristotle, this is an essential definition. It includes all human beings and doesn't leave any out.